So happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to everyone.
This is the Two Mats regular Q&A brought to you by the subscribers of the New European.
Yes.
And if you want to join them, by the way, in supporting this podcast, there's a great offer. So stay tuned for that subscription offer.
This is a real doozy.
Should we crack straight into the first question, mate? Can I read it? Because I've got no clue as to what the answer is.
Sure.
It's far too complicated for me.
Oh, it's not really, but okay.
The public borrowing figures for July were pretty high. Are the Mats as apprehensive as I am about Rachel Reeves's first budget in October? From Susie in York.
The reason it's not complicated is that the answer is yes. I mean, the background is just that the public sector borrowing figures came out this week or last week, and the government borrowed 3.1 billion during July, which is more than they were expecting to, and more than forecast by the Office for Budget Responsibility. And it's just another piece of bad fiscal news. And the reason Susie's question is well made is that yes, I am, and I imagine you feel the same, Matt, from previous conversations, that I'm very apprehensive now. I mean, about what Rachel Reeves will do in October in terms of not just raising taxes, because there are some taxes that should be raised, but also in terms of spending cuts. And there's already a massive backlash over the cuts to the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. I do think that I'm going back on what I said before, but I think that the chances of axing the two-child benefit cap is receding. And it's this rather gloomy sort of prospect that the first big fiscal event of the Starmer era is going to be extremely painful. And I haven't got a sort of I wish there was a rabbit in the hat rather, to pull out and say it'll all be fine. But I do think that at the moment the immediate sort of forecasts economically are going to be pretty grim, and that's bad news generally. It's also bad news in the light of what happened in the riots, because not there's ever an excuse for riots ever, but the mood of the nation is quite tense and we could do with some good news. I mean, I suppose I don't know what you think, but I suppose the only thing I would like from Reeves, from Starmer, is a sense of a roadmap towards some sort of hope. I
mean, ever since we started this podcast, we've been saying we need a national mission, we need a sense of purpose, we need a goal, a direction, we need a collective energy.
Yes.
And frankly, they haven't messed anything up so far, but there's certainly with a few kind of notable exceptions. I think Wes Streeting has been aggressively impressive. I don't know, maybe that's it.
I've been very disappointed by the law and order emphasis of the asylum and immigration policy. I mean, that's not enough.
My nightmare is that this Labour government is some sort of kind of competent continuity. It's like a less chaotic, shambolic sort of batten down the hatches. In fact,
Sunak without Rwanda.
George Osborne without all what followed him. We're actually talking about, without using the word, but we are talking about something akin to continued austerity here.
But no, we are. It's not akin to, but I mean, I think you're right. I think that if you were sort of placing bets now, at the end of August on what the budget will contain, it will be essentially an austerity budget as things stand.
And the 2-cap thing, by the way, is a fucking disgrace.
Yes, it is.
It's an absolute disgrace. I've been in Rio de Janeiro, right? And I was reading up about the history of Brazilian politics, as you do, and reading about how Brazil under Lula and other kind of socialist governments enabled, it was conditional support for poor families.
Yeah.
So, and Brazil, it's a very different case, but Brazil had 14 million people living on $10 a month, right? Wow. And so children, literally, it's funny when you walk around Rio de Janeiro, the best way to tell, because everyone dresses so casually.
Yes.
But the best way to tell what social class someone's from is just by looking at their feet, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where it tells. And you get people wearing bright white, fresh sneakers, or the other end of the scale is you get people with about an inch of grime on their
feet.
calloused feet.
Yeah.
And Lula set out a policy to say that every parent who committed to getting their children to school 75% of the time, getting them inoculated and submitting themselves to health examinations at certain periods throughout the year would get an extra 200 Brazilian reals as a family, which was significant, proper uplifting of huge amounts of poverty straight out. And of course, people, conservative Brazilians say, now we've got big families who are encouraged to breed more, and all of this stuff. And there's no incentive to work and all that. And maybe some of that's true, but there's no question that first period of Lula's presidency saw enormous social movement. Now, but it was a gamble, and they spent a lot of oil money on it, and they spent a lot of tax revenues on it. But it was something that people go, okay, I get it. We're going to take a whole generation and we're going to upwardly mobilise them. Not a perfect policy at all, but it was a mission. And again, where's the mission? Where's the bet? Right, we've got to take a bet at some point.
Well, it's interesting because exactly. I mean, you have to. Politics, like life, is a wager.
Yeah.
So the best of Starmer was during the riots. I thought he was excellent, which is, I don't want to hear anything from legitimate grievances. I don't want to hear anything about that. This is thuggery. We're going to run the courts hot round the night. You're going to go to prison. This is far right nonsense, and I'm not having it. And I thought, great. That's the prosecutor in action, and it needed to be done, and it curtailed something that could have gone really ugly. I mean, it's horribly ugly, but but that's not enough. Great. It's a precondition to be someone who stands for law and order and doesn't, as by the way, many conservatives have done. I mean, it was no accident that there were people shouting, stop the boats in the Whitehall riot, right?
Yeah.
So shame on you, Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
But that's only the start. Is Starmer, is Rachel Reeves serious about a complete social renewal? I mean, you talk about a decade of renewal. You have to start talking about what that means, particularly if the first chapter of it is going to be painful. At the moment, all I hear is, and I understand this, the Tories have left us with the black hole, and it does appear the Tories did leave them with, many unfunded spending commitments. But that won't last.
Yeah.
No, because the Tory party is to all practical purposes non-existent now.
Yeah.
So I think that building an awful word narrative that people can believe in is now absolutely essential. We always said they wouldn't have a honeymoon, and so it has proved. And
the only thing that you can bet your life on is that in the absence of that narrative, somebody like Nigel Farage will fill it.
Yeah, there are plenty of narrative writers out there.
All right, Susie, great question.
Thanks, Susie.
You. Next question, please.
Is there a recent example of a new city that turned out not to be a blight on the landscape and/or a white elephant? For a cautionary tale, one only has to look at Indonesia's attempt to build a new capital city in the middle of nowhere. A swimmable Thames and a rewilding of Great Britain are better aspirational goals. At North of the Equator 2094 on YouTube. Matt, you like that city in Saudi Arabia, don't you? Is it the line?
I don't like it.
No, I don't mean you like it, but you're kind of interested.
How dare you impugn my...
No, I wasn't impugning you at all, but you're interested in it.
I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that... I think it's unfortunate that it's in Saudi Arabia, but
just as a concept.
But as a concept, as a new way of living, absolutely. I would say Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
I spent loads of time in Milton Keynes trying to start a new local newspaper there, and had never been before. You've been to Milton Keynes Bowl, have you, for David Bowie?
Yes.
1983 Serious Moonlight Tour.
Serious Moonlight.
I was too young, so you were just of age to go to that. It's one of the great regrets of my life.
I need to bring that into it.
But Milton Keynes. Well, actually, when I was in Brazil, I was asked, "Am I over 60?" by one of the guards for.
And you said
cheap. I said, "Is the ticket cheaper?" Absolutely, all day long, mate. Milton Keynes is a great place.
Yes.
It's really wonderful. So I don't
not against new cities necessarily. No. I mean, I think that they. Look, there's going to be more of them. I mean, there's the Songdo in South Korea has been quite a success, and Brasilia perhaps not so much.
Well, I flew into Brasilia last week.
What's it like now?
Well, I flew into the airport, changed planes in half an hour, flew out again. But as I flew over, it looked amazing.
Very pretty.
But it's a great story, Brasilia, isn't it? It's got one of the world's great architects, Oscar Niemeyer.
Yeah.
It's a concept town.
Yes.
It's built in the shape of an aeroplane, actually, with wings and a central kind of fuselage and with different. And the road system looks amazing. I bet you it's dead easy to get around.
Yeah, I know.
But of course, it's in the middle of nowhere and it's got its own problems. But it's the human nature is to create new things.
Yes, I mean, I think that the sting in the tail of North of the Equator 2094's question about the swimmable Thames and the rewilding is interesting, though, which is what are our priorities? Because we are going to have to, I mean, this is all assuming a ambitious government, and we've just said that we probably don't have one, but let's pretend, as a thought experiment, that we did. Having a swimmable Thames and more rewilding would. I mean, I like to think that building new cities and new towns and having
they're not
a decent environment are mutually exclusive.
No.
But I rather fear that at the moment we're not going to get either.
Well, talking about a swimmable Thames, I should shout out for Fergal Sharkey.
Shout out for Fergal, yeah.
Who's organising a national march,
which is really important
for clean water in this country, which is one of the obscenities. Of this first world developed state.
It is incredible.
Literally having blobs of shit floating down its short streams.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're right. Let's
it is what it is.
Fergal's organising a big march. The New European's going to be involved. A player in that and involved in that. Absolutely delighted
Proudly
to be. So, but I do agree. I don't think any of this is mutually exclusive.
No.
Next question, please. With Harris and particularly Waltz both having a Keynesian outlook, are we seeing a resurgence of that economic model in the West? Is neoliberalism finally in trouble?
Well, it's a very interesting question.
And that's from at col.hartford9855 on YouTube.
A lot of numbers today.
Send our regards to the 9855 family.
I hope that 9856 is doing well too. Well, it's a very good question. Look, Keynesianism.
Explain Keynes.
All right. Well, Keynesianism is reduced to its essentials. The idea that government intervention, especially when it comes to aggregate demand, is the key to economic prosperity. Named after J.M. Keynes, the famous economist of the 20th century, and that crucially that total spending is what really determines economic outcomes from, I guess, production to employment, things like that. Whereas neoliberals talk about supply side reform and interest rates and so on, and don't like the idea of the state picking winners and spending things. And I mean, what people call neoliberalism is a bit of a term of art because it's now come to mean anything I don't like.
Right. Okay. What, like Everton Football Club?
Exactly.
Neoliberal setup.
Everton is a neoliberal football club. I mean, I think we can take that as read. I think we all knew that, right? Tell us something we don't know. But what is certainly true is that, and we have talked about this before, is that for 40 years, the Western world has been in the thrall of a sort of Reaganite, Thatcherite economic approach, which is to suggest that less regulation, less taxation, talk about rolling back the frontiers of the state, but actually, in practice, you rarely do, but at least containing the state, the state as minimal as you can get it. And what's interesting is how that flows through even the centre-left governments of Clinton, Blair, and so on. That really they were variants on that. And I think what is true is that it has, that approach at least has sort of reached the end of its utility.
Yeah.
Now, whether the answer is a return to full-blown Keynesianism, sort of FDR New Dealism, I don't know. But Cole.Hartford on 9855 is absolutely right that the New Democratic team are as Keynesian as any American likely presidential team that there has been for a very long time.
Right.
And I do think that there are people who are in a rather ragtag and ill-organised way starting to ask some important questions precisely for pragmatic rather than ideological reasons, which is that, as again we've discussed a lot, government is going to have to do a lot more than it did in the 20th century. And so somewhere there's going to have to be money for that, and well-organised government, because you don't want money being wasted. And I think what I slightly worry about is that the extent to which there is kind of a hum of thinking around that is not clear to me.
No, and as we responded to the first question,
yes,
capitalism won't take an outrageous bet of its own volition.
No.
You know, a government has to put in
that's exactly right.
Put it on the stage and say,
yeah,
right, here's the incentives, here's the goal, this is what we're going to,
yeah,
and put all the circumstances in.
And
in
government
place.
can do a lot. I mean, government has become such a dirty word in some circles that it's often forgotten that, you know, well-run governments can actually create the circumstances in which economic prosperity can flourish and, you know, become more attractive to investment, and not just by tax cuts. I mean, one of the things that Sunak got so wrong at the end was that he was changing things all the time. That investors love stability. And outside investors were going, well, hang on a minute, you see, changing the net zero targets, and now you're cancelling HS2. I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so that there's a role for that. But I do think that there's a global question, which is what is the role for government in the 21st century? And, you know, we're about to hit the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, and that debate has not really begun in earnest.
I recall, not for the first time, JFK saying, you know, we do these things because they are hard to do. You know, and that's what government's role is. It's to do the hard things.
Yes.
It's not to manage the easy things. You know.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't know about neoliberalism because I'm never quite sure what it means, but I can tell you what, technocracy is certainly in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, technocracy will not do anymore.
And apologies to Everton fans, love you dearly.
They're technocrats.
Technocratic neoliberals.
They're technocratic neoliberals.
Yeah. Right, thank you. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back for some more of this. The Two Mats podcast is brought to you by the subscribers of the New European.
Thank them all.
Thank all 35,000 paying subscribers.
God bless them, they're great people.
And for a special offer for Two Mats listeners, we're going to give you a very special gift. Do you know what it is, Matt?
I think it's a book by Tony Blair, isn't it?
It is a book by Tony Blair.
About, you know, the lessons of leadership.
And do you know what? It's Tony Blair's actually signed the book.
My time's money, you know, so...
So we've got signed copies of Tony Blair's new book on leadership, and by the way, he's not signing many of them, so they're limited.
This is a proper thing to have.
Proper thing to have. And you can claim your free copy of Tony Blair's On Leadership, signed by Tony Blair, when you go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. And there's a link in the show notes. Okay, Matt, next question, please. It's a long one. What do you think about the appointment of donors or supporters of the Labour Party into the neutral, in quote marks, civil service? Ian Caulfield as Director of Investment at the Treasury. The vetting body was not told about his donations of 20 grand. Labour advisor Emily Middleton as Director General in the Department for Science and Technology, weeks after her public digital firm donated £67,000 to Labour's Peter Kyle. Jess Sargent, a former Labour Together staffer, to the Cabinet Office's Propriety and Constitution team. Interesting question, Ben Valentine. Thank you. What do you think about that, Matt?
Well, I don't think there's anything improper in having someone who's been a staffer at Labour Together being put into the team, because after all, you know, it's long been the practice for decades that there are lots of political appointees. I mean, not anything like as many as there are in other countries.
Who've worked in adjacencies and are familiar and proven.
So I think that's fine as long as they go through the normal vetting process. The other two are more challenging. And I'm reminding you, I think you said in a Q&A last year, Matt, or early in the year, that no one should be allowed to get an honour who donated to a political party.
Yeah.
And I rather think that no one who has donated to a political party should be able to work for the government.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is that trust in public life is in the absolute gutter.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's time to err on the side of caution.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I don't know.
I don't know anything about these people.
I've never heard of Ian Caulfield.
I'm not impugning either of these people's motives at all.
I'm sure they are immaculately qualified for the jobs, but as you say, the macro picture. I mean, let's take a totally unrelated situation where context is everything.
Yes.
These extraordinary sentences being handed out to people who, if they had assaulted a policeman outside a pub on a Saturday night in Leamington Spa, would have got 200 hours community service, if that. Getting 300 days or 3 years in prison. It's because of the context, isn't it?
Of course.
Because people look at it and say, you are part of something that we object to. And there is a reality that we object to the corruption of our political system. And so if anything smells of corruption, then it's a massive negative.
Yes, and going back to the Nolan report in 1995, which started the whole sort of process of evaluation of all this, it was very clear that from then that the perception of impropriety was not as bad, but as important in maintaining public trust as impropriety. Now, I have no reason to think either of these people have done anything wrong. However, I think having donors then parachuted into state roles is not a good idea.
Is iffy. And also the one thing that I find troubling, the vetting body wasn't told about
that
donations.
Seems to me
that's more problematic.
That's problematic. But I do think your kind of suggestion for a rule on honours might well be transported with profit into the world of appointments too.
Do you know, I mean, I don't want to get all Marxist on this, but I do
go on.
Oh, all right. I do think that actually you could outlaw donations altogether. The state could fund political parties in proportion to performance.
There's an argument for that, and I think that it'd be very hard to get past the public, but actually it wouldn't half get rid of a lot of problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Ben Valentine, thank you so much. Very interesting question. Blue Pill 232. Do the Mats believe that the Queen said that Trump was, quote, very rude?
This is such a good story.
Yeah. Well, where did it come out?
It's the origin of the claim is that this came from a new book the mighty Craig Brown has coming out about the Queen.
Right.
And Craig has written great books about Princess Margaret, and I think the book we both like about the Beatles.
Yeah.
He's a great writer and he's actually a very good reporter, so I buy this.
Yeah.
The story is that a few weeks after one of Trump's visits, it hasn't been revealed which one because the book isn't out yet, the Queen, late Queen, confided in another lunch guest that she found Trump very rude, and she particularly disliked the way he couldn't stop looking over her shoulder as though in search of others more interesting. Has the ring of truth, doesn't it? I love the idea that you're looking over the Queen's shoulder. It's very funny. And my favourite detail was that she was a wily one, wasn't she? She believed that Trump must have some sort of arrangement with his wife Melania, or else why would she remain married to her, right? Which just shows that she was a wise old queenie, right? But what was even more brilliant was that, of course, the thing to do if you're Trump is, in the middle of the battle of your life to get back into the White House, stay out of jail, right?
Yeah. What
do? You shut up, ignore it, right? What does he do? He goes ballistic, says, this is totally false. It's been written by, excuse me, it's been written by a sleazebag author. And then he said, and I mean, how can you? He said, I heard I was her favourite president. And you think, oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, better than Kennedy, you know, right. Better than Eisenhower, you know, better than, I don't know, Reagan, better than anyone ever, anyone ever in the whole world. Yeah. I mean, I think the recent president that she really did like, and this has been multiply sourced and written up, with the Obamas.
Right.
And she particularly liked Michelle Obama.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And they got on great. And so I would have thought that the Queen would have seen through Trump a mile off, really.
Yeah.
I'll
tell you one thing.
Good.
Blue Pill 232. She might not have said it, but I can guarantee she thought it.
100%. Yes. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I guess it was the essence. She must have thought, Christ almighty, I'm already 120 years old and I have to put up with this crap, you know? It's absolutely the worst aspect of being the Queen.
That's right.
Is that as a fellow head of state, you have to sort of pretend to have parity with this maniac, right? Sitting at you, talking.
I mean, can you imagine the poor woman, right? After all those years of service, the last president she meets, Trump. The last prime minister she meets, Liz Truss. She must have gone to her grave thinking, the whole world has gone to hell in a handcart.
What was it worth it? I'm out of here. Beautiful corgis. I mean, just the hell of it. Anyway, the answer is I don't know about you. I do believe it.
Yeah, I'm erring on the side of absolute belief. Thank you, Blue Pill 232. Everyone's got bloody numbers in their names.
Well, it's the digital era, Matt. I think it's going to get all of them.
Maybe we should just christen our kids with long numbers, like number plates.
Number plates. LGU74, come over here.
You wouldn't have to give your age, would you? It could all just be done in a wanna.
No, I think it's the way we're heading.
Right. Last question? Nope, that's it. That's it. Really? Oh, time has flown. Anyway,
time flies when you're abusing Trump.
Don't forget your wonderful subscription offer. You get a free copy of Tony Blair's new book on leadership, signed by Tony Blair. And they are going like hotcakes, so don't dilly-dally.
Code WMD.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
That is not the code.
That's a joke.
That is not the code.
Joke. Sorry.
The link is not that.
Of course, there were no WMD, so how could it be?
Yes. It's 45 minutes. The actual link is theneweuropean.co.uk/2matts, number 2, MATTS.
So until
Friday,
have a good week.
Have an amazing week.
Enjoy it.